active as well, yes.
After the war, your father was invalided out of the RAF and then got a job in Iraq. Are there any particular episodes that you can recall from those years in Iraq?
Well, actually, in the Middle East, from my memories of them, Dad became quite reclusive, really, and Mum loved to go out and enjoy herself, and I think it was a very insular lifestyle in the respect it was very colonial. It was in a country where, you know, you didn't mix with the indigenous population. I mean, you didn't actually. So the Americans and the English used to stick together. And Dad didn't particularly enjoy socialising. That's when he was, you know, obviously he didn't cope with it. And he was a very attractive, good-looking man, seemingly, you know, wanting to. And Mum was also very much wanting to go out and enjoy herself. But when it came to it, Dad couldn't cope and would often stay at home. So my memories would be that Mum would actually go sometimes on her own, or if Dad went, he would sit back and watch Mum, really. And so that must have been very hard. So those times aren't necessarily always happy memories. No, they're not.
There came a point at which your parents' marriage began to break down, and subsequently your father developed mental illness. Were you aware of anything odd in his behaviour during those later years of your parents' marriage?
I suppose it was probably always there, but as I got older and more aware of this, it's like as children you see things as norm, and I suppose, you know, you just think everybody else goes through this. And certainly I can remember lying awake at night often, hearing them arguing and wishing they'd stop. But I assume most people's parents did, and I just can remember sometimes 2 a.m. thinking, will they ever stop arguing?
Right, well, the next problem, given that we've now got letters out of numbers, the problem is these letters must have been rearranged in some way to produce the code, and so what was that method of rearranging them? And when you stop to think how many different ways you can rearrange letters into some sort of code, then it became quite a daunting sort of task to try and figure out exactly what method was used, because of course there's only one solution to this problem. You either get it or you don't. And so it was quite a challenge then trying to do different methods to work out the code from this series of jumbled letters. Again, there were more stages to this process. The next stage was that I realised from a few marks in the margin and some zeros which occurred in the numbers that they should be written out in rectangular blocks of 34 letters across and 33 letters down. And the numbers were, or the letters were divided into these sort of regular sections, and this was the appropriate way to put them. So that was once I discovered that, was the sort of second stage of the process.
Things went from bad to worse for Pamela and Donald. Their periods of trial separation grew. Even a new start in a London job for Donald failed to keep them together. Finally, they divorced. Donald's mental state fluctuated. He remained a man of secrets. In 1978, he devastated Pamela by announcing suddenly that he was marrying a wealthy widow. Her name was Cynthia. But this second marriage precipitated one final disaster. The prisoner of war years had been too terrible. The untreated effects of what today would be called post-traumatic stress disorder caught up with him. In November 1983, his mental state gave way. A psychiatrist recommended him for urgent hospital treatment, but no bed was available. 2 days later, he suddenly assaulted his new wife. The collapse was complete. By a terrible irony, his years as a prisoner of war had led to his being held in a prison cell again, before he could be remanded to a mental hospital. In the few months left to him, he died in 1985, it seemed that he would be alone in the world, confined to this hospital or that nursing home, with no one to comfort him. But the code of love is strong indeed. Pamela was waiting.
Oh, will you never let me be? Oh, will you never set me free?
You got Donald into a nursing home.
In Tunbridge Wells. just off the common, and where he was very comfortable and very well looked after, and I used to go down every day and spend the day with him. But his mind was going then, and he, it was so sad to see, because you couldn't really have a proper conversation with him. But one day we took him to the Spa Hotel, which was just nearby, Christopher and I, and we all had coffee. And that's when we remarried with the ring I gave him.
And that is the ring that you've got on your finger now?
That's the ring I gave him when we married. And he took it off his finger and put it on mine and sort of said, now we're married again. We can always say we're married. He said we will always be married.
When you did that to me, I somehow knew that this had to be the winds of March that made my heart a dancer.
I then wasn't sure what to do with the letters once they were in these rectangular blocks. And it was one morning when I was lying in bed, having woken up early, that I recalled something that was on the front page of the diary that was sent to me, which was the names Donald Samuel Hill and Pamela Seeley Kirridge, which was his name and his fiancée's name. And I counted the number of letters in these names just idly as I lay in bed and came to the answer 34, which of course is the number of columns in this rectangular block. And so you can use a keyword for a coding method where you need the same number of letters in the keyword as the number of columns. And so this was clearly a keyword which was used to rearrange the columns in these rectangular blocks. So that was the third stage. And the final stage was to realise that instead of these letters being written across in rows, they should have been written down in columns. And once I did that and used the keyword, then suddenly there on the screen in front of me was the text that I could finally read. So at long last I got to the end.
And a nightingale sang.
Suddenly one of the officers whipped out his sword, and I thought they had decided to bump me. I am now the only RAF officer left. A sad day for me to lose such grand companions in distress.
It made me understand so much once I read that diary.
Another parade, and we're kept standing for 2 hours and nearly freeze to death. Several men pass out in hours these days, thinking of home and family, especially Pam. Thank God for you, Pammy, darling. Your memory is ever with me. I still have your photograph, signet ring and cigarette case. I will never lose them.
I just couldn't bear the thought I hadn't been able to have it when he was alive. Then I would have understood.
There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice to the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die.
That night embarked